Welcome back to Block TV. It's time now for Crypto Globe, where we take a trip around the world to hear about the latest developments in the industry. And of course, to guide us on the tour is Ethan Pierce, Director of Paris-based Crypto Assets Institute. Ethan, great to see you again.
Always good to be here.
All right, so to kick us off this week, we've got an interesting story that I suppose is very current in the sense of dealing with that classic US regulation or international regulation market and how companies are dealing with that issue. In this instance, Poloniex is the key to this story. Ethan, break it down for us.
Yeah, so 18 months ago, Circle bought Poloniex for $400 million, and now they're spinning it out. So I think there's going to be a lot more detail about the exact reasons why as this moves forward. But according to Circle, they want to focus on a couple specific things: USDC, their stablecoin, and its basically its traction with different financial services and its growth, and then Seed Invest, which is an equity crowdfunding platform in the US that they also recently purchased, and they want to continue scaling that, but they also want to move Seed Invest, it looks like, into tokenized securities. So not just maybe startups around equity investment, but moving into real estate or intellectual property or other things. So I'm guessing that with some Libra thrown in for good measure, this became an issue of US versus international regulatory compliance, and kind of maybe the same reason why some of the Libra members pulled out. We don't want you to mess with our business over here, so we're not going to do the business over there thing. And so it looks like that Poloniex is kind of the victim of that, in the sense of that Circle has to choose to focus on its regulatory compliance in the US with its existing things around USDC and Seed Invest. Poloniex is going to go its own way. What that actually means, we'll see. They're going to call it Polo Digital Assets. I don't know if that's going to change the name of Poloniex itself, or if that's just the name of the company behind it. Why is this important? Well, if you are a US user of Poloniex, you are no longer able to trade on Poloniex. Starting actually on November 1st, you'll no longer be able to trade. You can no longer sign up for an account starting now if you are an American. And then in mid-December, I think, you have until mid-December to withdraw the crypto that you actually have on Poloniex if you're an American. So by the end of the year, that will be a US platform that will be able to operate without caring about US regulatory compliance with the SEC, which probably makes their plate a little bit lighter for dealing with the other things for their other platforms. So I think that we're this is a shame that we're seeing, you know, these tools and the foundational layer of the ecosystem in terms of exchanges and other things having to be divided between us and them. But it looks like that, given the way the SEC is moving forward on a lot of the compliance issues around these things, that's kind of what's going to happen. So I think, as we saw with Telegram's response to the recent problems, if it's a moving target and we don't know what you mean as far as the SEC, and it made it seem like we were all fine, and you said it was fine, and now you say it's not fine, that kind of regulatory vagueness and opacity just doesn't cut it. So I think if they really want to scale Poloniex as a business, and if it is going to interfere because there's too many regulatory issues between that and having growth of the stablecoin plus another platform in the US for tokenized securities, then it's just going to, sooner or later, these things are going to move to be only US or be everything but the US. And that's really a shame. But as we see with tokenized securities, those are probably going to be localized opportunities, meaning that if you're tokenizing an apartment building or an office in Paris, that's probably going to be AMF or at least EU regulated in the sense of where you put it. And a lot of those investors might be local. If all that scales in that way, then maybe the US will just be left outside of these things to reduce friction around regulatory compliance. So interesting news, kind of sad, but I think we're going to see more of this, us versus them, moving forward.
Yeah, certainly it does seem like the US is building a fine moat around itself when it comes to some of these crypto developments and what it'll mean from a regulatory standpoint. Interesting to see whether regulators will change their stance, or if, as you say, the US will just simply be left in its own playing field. But moving now on to another story, and one which deals with my core fears, Ethan. This touches on things that keep me awake at night. Of course, we're talking about SIM swapping and the potential dangers that presents. Michael Terpin coming out with some strong words against the FCC. Ethan, what can you tell us?
Have you been dreaming of Michael Terpin again? If that's what's keeping you up at night. So this is an interesting thing. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people who've had this happen to them, and Michael is probably one of the more expensive bills for SIM swapping, with upwards of 24 million in crypto lost. So SIM swapping is just this idea of, in this particular case, going through the employees of your telecom provider, and convincing them that you as a hacker are actually the owner of the account, and getting them to reissue the SIM so that you can then plug that into your phone, which will allow you to then go into whatever email accounts or crypto accounts you have and start the process of reinitializing passwords. Specifically because if you're using two-factor authentication and you're using the SMS version of that, then now, because they have the telephone number, they'll receive the texts, and they can start the process of getting the email account, going from the email account into the crypto accounts. And then when they want to transfer out of the crypto accounts, having the SMSs there as well, that all that kind of process. And so this has happened to a lot of people, and for at least over a year now, Michael Terpin has been suing AT&T for that loss, basically saying that they did not do enough to protect his account in terms of privacy, in terms of confidentiality, but more specifically because he already had gone in and put specific measures in place with their fraud department to make his account more of a high interest target, so known as a high interest target, so that then it would take extra procedures to do this, and it still didn't seem to work. And there's another story here from a guy in California named Seth Shapiro, who he had been SIM swapped several times. I think he's a technology professor, so he's also visible in talking about some of these things, and he lost around 1.8 million. And in that case, very clearly, the employees of AT&T, according to his suit, actually sold access to that information to the hackers. And so if you combine all this together, we're starting to see more and more. Jack Dorsey, the CEO of Twitter, had the same thing happen a couple months ago. That wasn't for monetary loss. They just managed to get in and use it to reset the access to Twitter and start tweeting all kinds of bad things from Jack Dorsey's Twitter account. So this problem isn't going to go away. Two-factor authentication is one of the layers of security that people should have in place, but if it's attached to SMSs through your phone number, and if your telecom operator is not putting limits in place to protect you, that's going to be a problem. So obviously he's going after monetary damages here. He's looking for the 25 million or so, I think 24 million that he lost. He's also suing for 200 million above that. In punitive damages, I can't, there's a couple conflicting reports on whether or not that part has been thrown out or not. So supposedly AT&T, the judge has ruled that AT&T needs to answer for the privacy complaints, for the fact that they didn't protect his confidentiality and other things under the Federal Communications Act. But then I also read that specifically the judge ruled against the action regarding him having lost the 24 million. I'm not sure exactly what the truth is of that, so I'm trying to continue to find exactly where we're at there, and whether there's going to be appeal on that or what that looks like. But in any case, Terpin just sent an email and posted an open letter to the FCC's director saying, here are the things that need to be fixed to make this work. So regardless of whether or not I get my money, let's make sure this doesn't happen to other people. And the first one is protecting passwords, but the second one is really this idea of, if people tell you, don't transfer my SIM without a significant amount of paperwork and with the fraud department, then don't transfer my SIM. And that seems pretty easy to pull off. So he's really pushing to also just make that happen. So whether or not that will happen, we'll see. But this is definitely something people should be paying attention to if they are protecting their critical accounts and information through two-factor authentication. But in any case, unique email addresses, unknown phone numbers, go out and protect yourselves.
Certainly, chain is only as strong as its weakest link, and this here seems to be a very weak link in the chain of personal privacy and security. One that even when you attempt to actually nail it down can still come back to bite you. Tough one, and as I said, something that keeps me awake at night, something for us all to remember. But now moving on to, I guess, some slightly more positive news for the sphere. We've seen Morgan Creek Capital, famously of the Pomps Association, raising $61 million for a blockchain fund with targets even higher. Ethan, break this one down for us.
So this officially Morgan Creek Blockchain Opportunities Fund number 2. So Fund 1 was a $40 million fund. They initially focused on raising 25 million, and they oversubscribed to 40. So this fund is looking to raise 250 million. First close on that right now is at 61 million, and they'll be doing 2 more rounds over the next 6 months to hopefully hit the 250. What I found interesting about the story, it's not an overly complex story. It's just a new fund. But what I find fascinating is that the 3 main investors into this first 61 million are a pension fund, actually 2 pension funds, and a hospital system. So, having these kind of typical fund of funds, limited partners into venture capital or PE or hedge come into something that is clearly identified as blockchain and crypto. I think that is a fantastic sign of institutional understanding. These type of investors are generally risk adverse, or to a certain extent, at least in between generally venture and potentially private equity or other things. So they're interested in making money, but they can't lose it because it's private equity. So because it's a pension fund, and so that is curious and really encouraging to see them investing in to a blockchain and crypto focused fund. So I would imagine we're going to see more and more of that, and it's going to be exciting to see between now and the end of Q1 if they actually hit 250 million for the final close of this fund. It's still being identified as an early stage seed fund. $250 million is a lot of cash to throw at early stage startups. So that's really cool for investing in entrepreneurs who are building the next stage of all of this.
Yeah, certainly. It could be an exciting development and a nice cash injection for the sphere. Get some key developments going, as you say. A lot of money to throw into early stage seed funding. Hopefully no one gets bitten by a bit of the volatility that's around the market at the moment, but that remains to be seen. All right, and now finishing us off for today, let's take a look at US Congress. As we said, sometimes a bit of a slow institution, but perhaps drafting some new potential legislation. What can you tell us?
Well, so this is just a draft bill at this point, and as we know, draft bills, most of them end up dying in legislatures. So we shouldn't take this as necessarily something that will happen, but it is a sign of the conversation. And given some of the tone of the conversation, I wouldn't be surprised if this moves forward. A U.S. representative from Texas, Sylvia Garcia, has introduced a bill to amend not necessarily amend, but to because how to say that correctly? It's a new bill called the Stablecoins and Securities Act of 2019, basically to add to the description or definition of securities to include stablecoins. Basically, I think the idea here is that if you can't, if we're going to keep discussing whether or not stablecoins are securities, let's just change the definition, which is potentially problematic. But if that may be where this is going. This really just underlines the idea that we're seeing with kind of the G7 nations and central banks, with France and Germany and many others who've come out to say we're actually getting on board with the idea of this digital money, especially a central bank digital currency. So digital currencies could be really interesting as long as they're sovereign, or at least the word they're using is democratic. So the worry here is that because there is not that the people cannot vote to directly control or have influence on where one of these currencies is going, then that creates a problem in terms of trust. And so the regulators on one side are saying that should stay our domain. So we want this to say a sovereign thing, and we've got plenty of things like Facebook and Telegram and Line coming out with currencies that operate inside of their ecosystems and enable cross-border remittance and payment. And that seems to scare them quite a bit. And so even though those functionalities can be debated about whether or not it's a security, if we change the definition of security, then, well, they'll be securities. One of the other guys, Warren Davidson, who is, I think, a little more open to a lot of these things, still did say that for him, as long as there is the potential that the central authority that can really change or even destroy the value of this asset that you're holding doesn't have any kind of oversight, then for them that really creates a situation that they need to look at. Anytime that there's value that you have that could be destroyed, they're looking at. He said we're going to look at that as a security. So we'll see exactly where this goes. But I think it's telling that we're seeing more and more of these, specifically Western countries, that are saying in response kind of to Libra that stable coins are great as long as we control them. If we're not going to control them, then we need to make sure that they are extremely controlled by us indirectly. So if it's not our stable coin, then your stable coin is going to come under our purview and be managed. We'll see exactly how that goes, where that's going to. We've seen some movements on Libra about how that might look with pegging to specific countries' currencies. But I find anything that gets us moving forward to really have transparency around the regulatory issue to be good. However, the problem is this is creating one more situation where we are potentially pushing people away from the people wanting to do this correctly, or potential good actors, right into the hands of potentially worse actors who are going to put this in domains or jurisdictions with less oversight or no oversight. And I think that's just going to actually create the problem or increase the problem that they think that there is with all of this, which is funding terrorism and creating money laundering issues. So we'll see where that goes. But in any case, plenty news on in the U.S. trying to figure out how to control all of this.
Yeah, I must say, love it or hate it, the fact that Libra has brought this conversation to this realm, that we're talking about cryptos in the essence of this wider scale political sphere. Ethan, I think it's a wonderful development and important that we're having these conversations now while the industry is still young.
It's amazing how much has moved forward, in the past couple months. So thanks, Libra, for moving the discussion forward. Not really sure where that's going to go, but but fantastic for the ecosystem to at least have all of this moving. So awesome.
Yeah, certainly it is exciting times. All right, Ethan Pierce, I want to thank you so much for taking us on this tour of the crypto globe. Look forward to speaking to you again soon, when I'm sure there's much more news in this sphere that never stops turning. In the meantime, stay with us at blocktv.com for all the latest in news and information. I'm Asher Westrop Evans. Thanks for watching.
For more news and updates, follow us on Twitter.